Get out. You're no daughter of mine. My mother's voice is a furious roar, her face flushed with anger as she glares at me, clutching a kitchen knife in both hands, the tip pointed directly at me. I can't support a leech that doesn't even contribute to living expenses, she yells. Not only do I contribute to the household expenses, but over half of my income, $3,000 a month, goes to this house. I've explained this to her countless times, but it never sinks in. She's lost her temper before, but I never imagined she'd wield a knife against me. I carefully maintain my distance, trying not to provoke her further, her cutting words ringing in my ears. If I knew you'd become such a parasite, I would have never given birth to you. My name is Catherine, and I'm 29 years old. Through hard work, I've become a systems engineer at a major corporation, inspired by my father, who always had a passion for computers. He loved tinkering with machines since he was a child. The first time he saw a computer, he was utterly amazed. Back then, computers were exciting, but the latest models are truly incredible. Look at this one. It's so thin yet the display is so clear, he would say, smiling as he took me, then just a grade schooler, to electronics stores. He'd show me the newest computer models, pointing out their features and teaching me about them. Seeing my father so enthusiastic about computers piqued my interest. My father, usually a man of few words, would always open up and teach me a lot about computers. Soon enough, I realized I was better at using computers than most of my peers, which further fueled my desire to delve deeper. I went on to major in engineering in college. When job hunting, I naturally gravitated towards computer-related fields. Now, I work happily as a systems engineer at my current company. While most of my work is remote, I've achieved significant results compared to my peers. Occasionally, I'd visit my childhood home and chat about work with my father. Those were the good times. But one day, he suddenly collapsed. I got a call from my mother and rushed to the hospital. Is Dad okay? He just dropped. I called 911 right away. They started tests as soon as we got to the hospital. They said it seems to be a subarachnoid hemorrhage and he needs immediate surgery. He's in the operating room now. I just don't know how we're going to get by from now on. Oh no, Dad, I thought, hoping and praying for my father's safety as I waited. A few hours later, the doctor came out and updated us on his condition. While the surgery was successful, they said there might be lasting effects like difficulty moving his limbs. At least he was alive, and for that, I was grateful. At my side, my mother remarked, I wonder how he's going to manage work now. I'm worried if he'll ever be able to work like before. What am I supposed to do if our main source of income is gone? It was always like this with her, always thinking of herself before anyone else. Seeing her like that just broke my heart even more. During my father's hospitalization, I noticed that he indeed struggled with his limbs, just as the doctor had warned. He worked hard in physiotherapy before his discharge, but it seemed the after effects were here to stay. Throughout his hospital stay, my mother would drop off just the bare essentials for him and leave almost immediately. Considering his commute to his current job and his physical condition, my father decided to retire early. With his need for constant care, I had a discussion with my mother about his future. With his condition, it's hard for him to live on his own. So, I hope you can help take care of him, Mom. I wasn't really expecting a response to begin with. I'm quite busy with various things, so I can't possibly take care of your dad. My mom dismissed the idea instantly. I felt disappointed. She was never the type to prioritize family. Even when I was little, she always placed herself first. However, I believed that she loved my father and thought she would lend a helping hand now that he was in this condition, but my plea for her to help take care of him was rejected as well. That's the way it is, huh? Got it. In that case, I'll come live there and take care of Dad myself. When can you come? Since my job is primarily remote, I figured I could balance work and caregiving as long as I had a computer and a stable internet connection. I knew life would be tough balancing work, caregiving, and house chores, but I decided to move back to my parents' house for my beloved father. The day I moved back, while I was sorting out my belongings, my mom talked to me. Hey, about meals, make sure we can eat by 7 a.m., okay? It's good to have a balanced diet with grilled fish, salad, and stuff for breakfast, considering our health. And please make sure to put the garbage in small bags and take it out frequently. I hate any unpleasant smells. Also, we need to clean the house every day. Ah, I'm glad you came back home, she said. She could take care of herself. But her attitude changed quickly. and she started to offload all the household chores onto me. However, despite her demands, I couldn't help but notice how dirty the house was. It seemed like she hadn't been doing any house chores at all. Sure enough, I ended up doing all the household chores by myself while she did nothing. She wasn't even home most of the time, living her life as she pleased. I was swamped every day, juggling work, caregiving, and household chores. My slightly thinner father would say, "I'm sorry for causing you trouble. You have your job too." But I just shook my head slowly and smiled at him. "Don't apologize, Dad. It's not your fault. I'm glad I came back home. I enjoyed talking with you." Hearing this, my father seemed a bit relieved. His condition wasn't so severe that he was bedridden or unable to eat by himself. I only had to assist him a little in his daily life, so it wasn't extremely tough, and I was happy to spend a lot of time with him, just like when I was a child. On the other hand, my mother, who did nothing, would still find things to complain about. "Catherine, your cooking is kind of bland and simple, isn't it? I wonder if Dad is getting enough nutrients from such a menu for a sick man like your dad. Don't you think you should add more variety to the meals? What a pity for parents to have such an undutiful daughter." She made these comments while gobbling down my cooking. However, since she brought up my father, I took her criticism seriously. Considering his age and reduced appetite, I thought it might be easier for him to eat if I prepared more small dishes rather than big platters. With this in mind, I increased the number of dishes, but my mother didn't say anything. Instead, a few days later, she commented, "The meals recently have too many dishes. Your dad and I are old. We can't eat this much. You've been living alone until now. Don't you know how to save money?" While she was clearing her plate, I couldn't help but retort, "It's not that. You told me to add more side dishes for dinner. I'm just preparing more small bowls so that Dad doesn't get tired of the food and to stimulate his appetite." Then Mom let out an obvious sigh and stood up from her seat. "What an attitude. It's as if I've been nagging and you're doing it reluctantly. That's so patronizing. I can't believe it. You take every little opinion as a complaint. That's why you're still not married." Expressing her anger with her whole body, Mom stomped her way to the sofa in front of the TV. Of course, the dishes were left on the table just as they were. Mom, now sitting heavily on the sofa, looked straight at me and yelled just one word, "Coffee." I thought to myself, who does she think is going to make it for her? As I cleaned up the table. Then Mom threw a cushion at me from the sofa. "Come on, hurry up and make the coffee. You're almost always home and not going to work. You say you're taking care of Dad, but I bet you're just after his retirement money. And yet, you don't even do the housework properly. You're really unreasonable." "Not this talk again. I've told you I've switched to working from home. When I'm in my room, I'm in meetings or working." No matter how I explained it, Mom refused to understand anything about working from home. In her mind, I had apparently moved back home under the pretense of caregiving, not contributing to living expenses, and was a disappointment to my parents. In reality, I am the one taking care of Dad. So why does she think I have access to and am misusing his retirement money? At the end of the day, it's me who's taking care of Dad, earning money for my parents' living expenses, and doing all the housework. I've been swung around by Mom's whims since I was little, but I've reached my limit. I feel bad for Dad, but I can't live with the three of us in this house any longer. A few days after making up my mind, I accompanied Dad to his physical therapy. He has the will to do it, and although we can't expect dramatic improvements, at least he's not getting worse. The doctor encouraged us to keep up the good work. When we returned home, we crossed paths with Mom, who was hurriedly leaving the house with big bags in hand. It's not unusual for Mom to be out of the house, and she often comes back with big bags from department store shopping sprees. So I didn't think much of it. However, the next day when I finally decided to go shopping and opened my closet, I realized all my cherished bags and accessories were gone. What? Why? I don't wear them all the time, and I haven't changed their location, so they should definitely be here. Suddenly, I recalled the image of my hurried mother from the previous day, and with a hunch, I confronted her. "Mom, did you go into my room yesterday?" "What's with the sudden question?" she snapped. "In the first place, this is my house, and I'm free to enter any room I want." "Then what's in that bag?" I asked, pointing to the high-end brand bag she was holding. "You sure had the money to buy luxury items. You're always telling me not to waste money." "That's right. Since you waste money, I had you compensate for it." Confused by her words, I furrowed my brows, and Mom started laughing gleefully. You had some pretty good bags, didn't you? Even just the bags and accessories amounted to a good sum of money. Mom had sold my accessories without my permission and used the money to buy things for her hobbies. I was furious and shouted, "What's this? I can't believe it. You stole and then sold them. That's worse than a thief. Give them back. Pay me back." Then, Mom twisted her face like a demon and yelled, "I can't believe my own daughter is talking back to her mother. When I was a child, I absolutely obeyed my parents. I worked for my parents. I took care of them. And yet you do nothing but complain." She hit the table with all her might. "Then why don't you help take care of Dad for once, huh? Do you remember ever taking care of him since I came back? Who prepared his clothes for changing? Who supported his chair when he stood up? You don't even do that much, and you say you're taking care of him. You're the one being taken care of the most in this house." Unable to hold back any longer, I too slammed my hands down on the desk, glaring at my mother. She had a bad relationship with my paternal grandmother and was treated harshly, similar to what you might call harassment from the mother-in-law. I couldn't say anything about that, but the one thing I couldn't accept was her claiming she was taking care of my father. My father had given up on receiving care from my mother long ago. Still, he tried his best to engage in small talk, bringing up topics from TV shows or stories he heard from friends during rehab. But as soon as my father would start talking, my mother would swiftly disappear from the scene. I wondered how she could claim she was taking care of him so confidently when she wasn't doing anything. While I was lost in thought, my mother remained silent. Slowly, she took her hands off the desk, turned her back to me without saying a word, and headed toward the kitchen. Is she just going to give me the silent treatment and run away from this discussion? I thought, sighing. Unexpectedly, my mother returned quickly. She approached briskly, holding a kitchen knife in both hands. Mom, her face, now turned a deep red, was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Shaking with anger, she yelled at me in a voice louder than I had ever heard from her. "Get out of this house, you parasitic leech. Living here, just waiting for your father's retirement funds." In that moment, I realized none of my words had reached her at all. To my mother, no matter how much I cared for my father or how much I worked, I was nothing more than a pest. "I'll find a new place and leave as soon as possible." I slowly backed away, saying this while creating distance between us. Seeing that my mother didn't move, I rushed into my room. I thought I wouldn't feel anything being rejected by such a distant mother, but tears wouldn't stop flowing from my eyes, not from sadness, but from intense anger. I immediately sprang into action. I started preparing to move out that very day. I consulted a colleague at work who had a friend in real estate, and they helped me out. During my free time, I packed my belongings into cardboard boxes. Finding a new place didn't take long, thanks to the help of my colleague. Once everything was ready for the move, I talked to my father. "Dad, can we talk for a bit?" "What's wrong?" I told my father everything about how my mother had treated me. "That's terrible. I had noticed something was off with your mom's attitude, but I felt like I was causing you both trouble and found it hard to speak up. I'm sorry." "It's not your fault, Dad. In fact, I have something on my mind too. When I was here, she pushed all the housework onto me, cleaning, laundry, cooking, you name it. It was like I was her housekeeper. On top of that, she would always come to me for money, and it was troubling me as well." My father continued, "Even now, when I need care, she only tends to Catherine and doesn't lift a finger to help her daughter. I'm really disappointed in your mom's behavior, so I've actually been thinking about getting a divorce." "I see. You've been through a lot too, Dad." "No, compared to what you've been through, it's nothing really. Thank you. Actually, Dad, being able to come back home and live with you has been the happiest thing for me. And I meant it from the bottom of my heart. I wanted to stay with my father from now on, too." "Dad, there's something I want to talk to you about." Aware of my father's feelings toward my mother, a plan had formed in my mind. A few days later, we decided to move out while my mother was away. She was out every Wednesday from morning to after lunch, attending her hula dance classes and having lunch with her friends, returning after 3 p.m. We arranged for the movers to come on a Wednesday morning when we were sure she wouldn't be home. They loaded our belongings onto the truck. As I realized this was my last time in this house, I felt a pang of sadness. I got into the rented car. I wasn't alone. My father was with me. Since both of us wanted to get away from my mother, we decided to move out and live together, just the two of us. In the car, my father spoke. "Catherine, was this the right choice? You could have taken this chance to free yourself from the burden of taking care of me." "Don't say that, Dad. I want to live with you. That's my greatest happiness. Let's work hard together from now on. Thank you. The move was over by the afternoon, and we sat down to eat the takeout lunch we bought, chatting away. Sorry about today. We didn't have much time, so it's just convenience store lunch boxes. I remember those. I used to eat them often before Catherine came back. I couldn't find the time to cook because of work. Your mom always had something to say about it, though. Dad laughed as he said this. Even such simple conversations made the meal taste delicious. After taking a break, we started to unpack and settle in. When the phone rang, it was from Mom. I picked up and switched to speakerphone so Dad could hear her. Hello. Why are you two suddenly gone? Mom's voice sounded frantic over the phone. Why are both your and Dad's things gone? What does this mean? Dad and I decided to move out together. It seemed like the right time, especially since you told me to leave anyway. Is there a problem? You don't have to worry about caregiving or living expenses anymore. What am I supposed to do about my living expenses without Dad? I'm relying on his pension and retirement fund. Where are you now? Why don't you handle your own affairs? We're already in our new place. I won't tell you where, but we bought a condo in a high-rise. A condo? In a high-rise? That's where rich people live. Don't joke around. There's no way you two can afford that. Mom clearly didn't believe us, but it was the truth. We had moved to a high-rise condo as close as possible to the hospital where Dad was receiving treatment. I've said this many times before, but I have a steady job. You called it a side job, but the company I work for is quite large, and I've been working there long enough to be entrusted with significant responsibilities. You might not remember, but the $3,000 I put into the account every month was from me, not Dad. I thought that was Dad's pension. The balance is high because of his retirement fund, right? Dad's salary was never that high, right? And the retirement fund, it was gone the month after he received it. I saw the credit card statement. It was all spent on designer bags, so it must have been you who used it up. That's why I've been supporting the family. I didn't know. No one told me anything. Explaining further seemed pointless, so I continued. It's not that you weren't told. You just didn't want to listen. I've told you many times. Dad told me about it. Even though he was working and you were at home, you were always out playing with friends. He said your spending habits were so bad that he had to manage the finances. And when you couldn't go out and play as you liked, you went around calling him a male chauvinist. Yet now, all you can think about is money, Catherine. You deceived me. Knowing all this, if you have so much money, come back home right now. For Mom, family seemed to be just a wallet. She never worried about Dad's condition, only about money. Yet she was sloppy with managing the bank book and thoughtlessly used the credit card without seeing any issues. I couldn't believe how she had managed to live her life like this. Dad, growing impatient with the endless conversation, stepped in. I thought you might listen if it was our daughter talking, but I was mistaken. We've been together for a long time, and for that, I'm grateful. From now on, you can live your life however you want, and I won't interfere. Let's get a divorce. Divorce? What about my living expenses? You'll be able to live without me. I'll send the divorce papers later. Just sign them. She truly only thought of herself. As I stood there in disbelief, Dad ended the call without another word. I'm sorry for making you feel bad, Dad said quietly. With those words, my father spoke, and I replied, Thank you, Dad. The next day, we headed to the hospital for Dad's appointment. I never expected to live in such a convenient place, Catherine. Thank you. I thought it would make your life easier, Dad. Plus, living here is much more affordable than in a downtown high-rise, so we'll be more comfortable. We left the house and arrived at the hospital in about 10 minutes. The automatic doors opened, and to our surprise, Mom was sitting on a chair near the entrance. She had apparently been waiting for us since morning. As soon as she saw us, she stood up abruptly and walked towards us. The phone call yesterday left me stunned. I haven't heard anything about your salary or you leaving with Dad, Mom demanded. Her hand suddenly grabbed mine, and she insisted, Let me live in the high-rise too. I remained calm, beyond anger. Why did she think she could manipulate us like this? I felt pity for her lack of consideration for our family. This decision was between Dad and me. Please accept it. I no longer see you as my mother. Thank you for everything until now, but I need to live my own life. I won't allow it. I'll need your permission, she retorted, gripping tighter. This is a hospital. Let go of my hand or I'll call the police, I warned. She glanced around, noticing other patients and hospital staff approaching with security. Panicking, she released me. Is everything okay here? A staff member asked as Mom hurriedly left. That was my mother. I apologize for the disturbance, I explained, watching her retreat weakly. In the following days, Mom attempted to lurk around the hospital, seeking us out but only asserting herself against those she deemed weaker. After being rebuffed by security and confronted by other patients, she stopped coming. That hospital visit marked the last time I saw her. Dad consulted a lawyer and pursued divorce earnestly. Despite Mom's protests and demand for alimony, she learned from the lawyer that her position was untenable. She tearfully pleaded for help, but the lawyer directed her to local support services, and the divorce proceeded without her consent. Several months after the hospital incident, the divorce was finalized. Dad decided to sell the house, which Mom vehemently opposed at first. However, upon realizing she would receive a substantial sum from the property division, her attitude swiftly changed. It was unsettling to see her transform into a stranger, solely focused on money until the end. After selling the house, we've been living in harmony, Dad remarked. Life settled into a routine of work, housekeeping, and caregiving. The support services here were better than in our old neighborhood, allowing me to manage work more consistently with the help of daytime caregivers. Dad's health gradually declined due to aging, prompting discussions about possibly moving him to a care facility. Just as we adjusted to this new normal, an unknown number called. Assuming it was work-related, I answered, only to hear my mother's voice. Catherine, I'm almost out of savings. It's only been a few months since we sold the house, and it's almost gone. Can you lend me some money? Consider it your final act of kindness to your mother. I don't have any money left to give you. Dad and I are finally happy. Please leave us alone, I responded firmly. Leave us alone. How dare you speak to your mother like that? Giving me money shouldn't be a problem for you, Catherine. What's the point of working at such a good company if you can't support your own mother? Don't contact me again. I was too exhausted to argue further. I ended the call and blocked her number. Despite my efforts, she kept changing her number and calling back. She eventually figured out how to bypass the block, turning it into a frustrating game of evasion for me. Eventually, I changed my own number, effectively ending the calls. In the following months, Dad heard snippets about Mom through mutual acquaintances. It turned out, after her savings dwindled, she moved into a modest apartment in the suburbs. Despite never having worked before, she managed with a part-time job, barely making ends meet. It seems she's finally learning to stand on her own, Dad remarked. I guess I might have spoiled her too much, I admitted quietly. You might be right, Dad sighed deeply. Are you happy now? I asked, smiling gently at him. Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. I'm sorry for all the trouble life caused you, he replied sincerely.